Hey now, it's your boy PSA Sitch here with another Tuesday show with everyone's favorite Michael Jordan dunk enthusiast, Adam Friended.
What's up, Sitch? And we're here with a very, very special guest who runs the channel YMS, and that stands for Your Movie Sucks. We'll talk about that. And
Yes.
we'll also talk about why he spells his name Adam so funny.
It's to differentiate myself from the other Adams.
Okay, cool.
That's the only it's not the legal spelling of my name. It's just the
Nice.
Smart.
It's there's too many Adams. There's too many Adams.
Yeah,
I
to
do
affect
get
SEO.
it. Well, as from one Adam to another, I
Yeah.
agree with you.
So for the sake of not getting confused, you might want to just only refer to me as YMS, and I'll try to remember not to respond to Adam if somebody says
no,
Adam.
it's cool. Look, if you hear my voice say Adam, you know I'm not talking to
Listen,
myself.
if I say
so.
Adam, you fucking idiot, we'll just let it up
Okay.
to interpretation who I'm talking
Oh,
Okay.
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Mm.
about.
So we basically took some notes. I was interested because you were on EFAP and you were talking
Mhm.
about Critical Drinker. And I've watched some of your videos on
Mhm.
movies and movie reviews and stuff like that. I largely agree with you. I listened to some more of your live streams before this. It seems like
Mhm.
you're interested in independent film. So maybe we can start there. Maybe
Sure.
do you have what kind of independent films do you like? I'm always pitching the movie Rubber and everyone's always
Oh.
getting very mad at me.
God.
Rubber is definitely the best movie that Quentin Dupieux has ever made.
Really?
Have you seen his other ones?
Hell, I've seen them all. Yeah, of course.
Damn, I can't stand him, but I think that Rubber was kind of like its own little lightning in a bottle, like because of how there's a scene where the audience gets bored and falls asleep, right?
Yes.
So
That's how
I
I felt
think that
watching
level
Rubber.
of self-deprecation and self-awareness kind of
Yes.
makes it okay, even though it's not a movie that I love personally, but I think it's like good in a kind of begrudging way.
It's interesting because I like a lot of independent films, and I think one of your critiques of Critical Drinker was that Critical Drinker is just basically critiquing big movies, and that there are a lot of independent movies that you think are possibly should be as big as these big movies. Look, I love Rubber personally myself, but I can understand why that's not a big movie, right?
Oh, it's
I
not.
like,
It's not necessarily that he's only talking about big movies.
okay.
It's that it's very loaded with this, I guess, over-encompassing idea of like modern movies suck, right? And so
Mhm.
even though there are other smaller, medium to small films that he's recommended on the channel, you click on the front page. Like, I don't know if I should right now. The overall vibe of the channel is very much kind of culture war-y, which I don't know if that is necessarily the best, most substantive way to view like movies as a whole. Like, sure, there's room for that sort of conversation, but I just there's something kind of weird about just like the entire branding, more or less being that. And I guess that there's people that would argue with me about whether or not that's even the case, because I know in a lot of circles that type of branding and that type of language is like very normalized. So I guess if there's anything that I try to get forward as a perspective or an ideology, it's just to add a bit of nuance to a conversation. I often don't go with hard like, oh, this is 100% true or this is 100% false, or like, I usually just, if I'm interjecting in something, I'm usually just trying to maybe more or less say, is there something more to the conversation? Is it a bit more complicated than what this simple answer might be? Right?
Let me ask a follow-up on this. And so how would you describe, just in movie review terms, your style next to Critical Drinker style?
Well, my style, I think that there's a bit more in terms of like the editing. I think that a lot of people gravitate towards my videos for, editing jokes. That's not exactly as present in Critical Drinker's style. Critical Drinker also talks about a lot of movies that aren't out yet. Critical Drinker will make entire videos or several videos about, someone said, like an actor or a director in charge of a new Disney project said something that was woke, and that's worth its own video. I don't know if that's not really how I do my content. In terms of, if you click on like the most viewed videos on my channel, most of mine are like dunking on things. They're critical comedic breakdowns. But I mean, like, I'm also happy to say that, like, on my channel, like the most viewed videos of mine, what was that, like Cool Cat, Kimba, like Old Boy. These are all things that I have like such a deep personal connection to and so much to say on the subject that they turn into like 6 months, year-long projects of like, not only shitting on a movie, but like really praising a movie. Like Old Boy, it's a love letter to the original. The Lion King review, it's a love letter to the original. And to really sometimes to get a better appreciation for the original, you need to see someone else attempt it in a way that just falls flat on its face. And I don't know, if you go to my channel right now, like the past, I would say every year, if you were to count like how many movies that I review in video form in a year, if there's like 100 movies, I would say probably over 50 of them are like independent film festival movies. I do them in batches, right? So my Toronto Film Festival video is like 20 some movies or whatever. My Fantasia one is 20 some movies. I'm doing a bunch of screeners for Vancouver Film Festival. That'll be its own video. So I guess there's a difference there, but I don't know. It's not necessarily that my channel is objectively better or correct or anything. It's just a different approach, right?
No, I totally agree. Hold on one sec.
Okay.
So on the dunking on movies, like obviously Critical Drinker is dunking on movies, but he's dunking on them for wokeness. I guess we'll get into defining wokeness later. Let's just set that aside for now. But how are your movies, or how are your movie reviews dunking on? What kind of dunking style do you have?
Well, it really depends on the movie. I am a very big fan of like cringe and awkwardness and
okay. So just bad movie stuff.
Well, I mean that's kind of that's not specific enough. It is a bit more complex.
Okay.
So in a lot of my reviews, I think something that I do that not every channel does is I talk a lot about the individual components of filmmaking, like lighting, cinematography, music, sound design choices. And that's not to say everybody has to, not everybody has the ear for music, or not everybody has the ability to articulate why they might enjoy a certain aspect of a movie. They might just know that they like it, but not really understand why. And that's fine. I think a channel like Critical Drinker focuses primarily on story elements. Not to say that that's not like an invalid criticism. I know some people are like, you can't criticize plot holes. I don't agree with that. I think that that's a perfectly valid criticism. But yeah, to differentiate between our channels, I would say that's one of the differences. Also, I have so many different styles of videos. There's a big difference between like a quickie review of like a movie that I'm actively trying to recommend and I only want to talk about for 2 minutes because I don't want to spoil it and because I want to have my audience watch the movie and I want their experience with the movie to be with the movie, not through my video, versus I'm going to talk about The Lion King for longer than the runtime of the movie, and here's every single detail as to why it's wrong, and it's wrong in ultra meta ways that you don't even realize a movie could possibly be wrong. There's like commentary tracks.
Do you evaluate on story? You mentioned story, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I do. Okay. So like in my Lion King video, they're in the way that characters were introduced in the film. In the remake, a lot of the information that was given was essentially done so in a way where it's really kind of impossible to go what's on and understand the characters' relationships unless you've already seen the original. So it existing as its own separate product is just like an utter failure. And so there's a scene where like Zazu gets introduced. In the original film, you know everything about their relationship in the first 2 lines of how they interact with each other.
Nice.
In the remake, it's like, you know, Zazu introduces himself in a way where he could just be doing it towards any other line, like the king approaches, blah, 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 blah. Like that means nothing. Whereas in the original, he's like, you know, they're having this playful banter. Scar's like, what do you want? And Zazu's like, you know, there's an implied history, and all it takes is just how you're communicating these bits of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have a 90-minute long film that says so much more substantively than like a 3-hour long film, just depending on how you write it. So
I
I
agree.
talk about writing in that way. There's many ways to criticize writing, but you know.
Okay,
depends on
Sitch,
what you're
go
going
ahead.
for.
What do you got?
Well, so are you against a channel dedicated to analyzing like politics and culture in movies, or is there something more specific?
As long as it's being honest about what it is, yes.
So is there a feeling that like it's not, if it was upfront, is that the issue?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I understand if you think that if you feel that there's someone who's trying to like subtly put something into their content. I mean, I think with Critical
Here's the
Drinker,
thing.
it's like pretty clear what his positions are on a lot of this stuff.
No, I understand it's clear what his positions are.
Mhm.
How much did you watch my original video criticizing him, or did you watch the stream on EFAP, or both, or how much what's
I
the
watched
context
like
of what?
3 hours of the 9-hour stream. So I
3
probably
hours.
got
Well,
through like 2 minutes of your video.
I watched your
Exactly,
original video.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
I watched
You watched the original video? Okay.
Yeah,
Would
and
you-
I even took some notes. So
Would you agree that in my original takedown, my original reaction, my original
well, I wouldn't even call it a takedown. I mean,
thank you. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Would you
This
agree that I
wasn't
was
like a
being like
dismantling.
very, you know, coming at it from good faith, empathetic, trying my best to understand, not,
Yes.
you know, like I wasn't, yeah, thank you. It's incredible. It's incredible in the comments to the EFAP stream, how like charged people are to think that it's some sort of like epic ownage, or like that I was doing some sort of like detailed attack video, or that I was like poisoning the well by stating my my anecdotal experiences and showing my biases to make my biases known. They're like, you're poisoning the well. It's crazy. People got way too like it's.
well, it's the
I
internet,
couldn't imagine
Adam. Come
taking
on.
things that seriously. I just couldn't like. I don't understand. This is part of the reason why I have this sort of like, not necessarily like opposition, but me wanting to interject some sort of nuance to these culture war conversations, because I feel like a lot of people that are exposed to media in a way that's only through the lens of a culture war, they start to see every single like discussion or disagreement as like, you're not on our side, or like they think that the world's like fucking ending if you just have like a disagreement with somebody, and they take it way too fucking seriously. Like a subreddit like 1/3 the size of mine shouldn't be like noticeably brigading my like it's so weird. Their community was so fucking I shouldn't go into too much detail about it, but it's just like really abnormal behavior that like I've had disagreements, debates, dramas with so many other communities, and this is a pretty unique experience. And then, you know, very shortly after, I got all these DMs from other people saying that they had the exact same things happening to them without me even prompting it, without me even like feeding that information to them. It's like, oh, this is just kind of like something that happens. They just take things way too seriously, and there's like a war.
Are you talking about Drinkers community or the EFAP community?
I think that they're so intertwined at this point that it's, I don't know how beneficial it would be to like
Gotcha.
attempt to differentiate them.
Right.
The EFAP community, I'm not saying like there's great people in that community. There's, people that aren't weird that have a life outside of the comment section. But on a video like, EFAP, Critical Drinkers in the title, Mahler has a podcast that he does with Critical Drinker every week that I didn't even know about until then. So obviously more of Critical Drinkers' audience is going to be there.
Right.
It doesn't, I don't know how productive it would be to try and like imagine like which bad commenters are from which audience or if it matters. All I'm saying is like,
Yeah, I understand.
If you want people outside of your political bubble to be interacting with, your community, then you gotta just not be so fucking unhinged, right? Like, it was a fucking meme when I made my Kimba video, and there was one commenter that left 1,000 comments on the video, and they were just like, they're responding to everybody, and I was like, holy shit, this is so weird. And they became kind of like an infamous commenter, and people would make subreddit posts about them just being like, wow, they're still going. Eventually I was like, okay, they're clearly unstable, and I banned them, right? Enough time had passed, 1,000 comments, right? I was going through the comments on that.
That's mad channel engagement, Adam. What are you doing?
Yeah, I was just, but you can kind of control, or at least make it clear what kind of things that you're comfortable with or tolerating in your own community, right?
Look, I totally agree with you. If you don't do some moderation, your community is just like there's going to be death threats in your comment section soon.
Yeah, and so going through the comments in that EFAP stream thing, who knows? Maybe none of them are from Mahler's or Drinkers community, and they're all just brigading from somewhere else. I don't know, but. You scroll you scroll and you sort by new, you're going for like months, and it's the same like 10 people responding to every comment. I'm like, this was an anomaly. Out of fucking 12 years on my channel, I saw one person doing this and it became a meme. And to know that there's like a dozen people doing that on one video, and it's like, okay, there's something kind of weird and unhinged about that, right? Like, and it's impossible to even, I guess, comment on it without, people who take the internet too seriously, or people who take comments or disagreements too seriously. Because now the conversation will be like, oh, I'm trying to make people think that they're bad, that their community is bad. And so it's like, it's impossible. Like, if they can't even understand why I would want to share my biases about Critical Drinker before diving into the live stream, if that, after explaining it 3 times, everybody's just like, you're poisoning the well, you're bad faith. Like, if you can't even understand that, then it's just like kind of an inevitable, there's no winning. I didn't even realize I was playing a game was part of the problem. People were like, you did such a bad job debating, you walked back so many points. I didn't think that I was debating. I thought I was having a conversation with some people that I thought were friends, like I thought I thought the whole point of the conversation was like to understand their position and for them to understand mine. And, if I was to walk back something like, Critical Drinker had a playlist of Drinker recommends, right? And I thought that was the extent of the films that he's recommended on his YouTube channel. And so, I made the mistake of not realizing that there were a bunch of other recommendations that weren't a part of that playlist, right? So if people are going to argue about like how many independent films he's recommended, or what even constitutes as an independent film, or blah, 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 it's not like, oh, I walked it back as in I lied about it and now I'm caught and now I'm admitting I lied about it. It's just, I'm not going to argue about it, right? It's something that, like, again, there's no 100% true or 100% false answer. I'm fine to have nuance in a conversation. And if the people I'm talking to want to argue about it, I didn't think I was in a debate. I didn't realize the whole point of the conversation was to win. But apparently I was not there the same understanding that other people in the conversation were, which sucks, but whatever. You learn something every day.
Going back to the political stuff, is it? I'm trying to figure out kind of like where you're coming from, because I think I understand it, but I want to make sure. Is it that you feel that the political takes are kind of not really apparent, or is it just that someone who, obviously you've dedicated a lot of your life to film and
Mhm.
understanding film and talking about film, that it bothers you to see people kind of only look at it through this lens of like the culture war?
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily that I think that you have to have like a certain uh exposure to a certain amount of things or only look at things in certain ways or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's a good idea to broaden horizons. I would say it's a good idea to, like, if you find that the content you consume is all drastically similar, to maybe like look outside the bubble. That goes for everyone. It doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on or where you fall politically. I think it's important to try and at least understand where other people are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like in the landscape of film criticism today, there's a lot of people in plenty of different circles. And the circle that it seems Critical Drinker and a few, however many people in that same crowd, Ryan something, Heels versus Babyface, who knows? Like, there's definitely a genre of people that are pretty much almost only like, I guess people are going to disagree with me, including Critical Drinker, but I don't know. It's impossible to watch every single video that someone makes, right?
Right.
So no one's going to have 100% accurate assessment of someone's like entire presence on the internet. So maybe Critical Drinker doesn't belong in this, but anyway, this exists. I think everybody agrees that this exists, that there's people that pretty much only talk about media purely through this sort of like culture war woke sort of thing, right? Like Ben Shapiro, right? He's not primarily a film review channel. He's not he doesn't primarily talk about art, but when he does, it's only for one reason, right? There's only one reason why he saw the Barbie movie, right?
Right. That makes sense, though, if he's doing primarily political content.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? So I feel like there's other channels that are essentially doing so in the same vein or in the same level of faith, or maybe with the same or similar goals that an individual Ben Shapiro media video would have, except it's 80% of the videos on their channel and they only talk about like movie stuff, and it's become its own genre. It's kind of interesting to me. And I'm not saying like, oh, no one should make this content or anything. It's just, hopefully,
yeah, I understand,
people can be aware of their biases and maybe try to go outside a bubble or something.
I think a lot of it, well, I think there's two things. I think a lot of it is the way the YouTube algorithm works.
100%.
Is like, yeah, because if you do content where you're complaining about woke stuff, or you're complaining about woke stuff in movies, and then not always, I mean, obviously for a big channel, I know Drinker's done, a lot of content not complaining about woke stuff in movies. But if you're kind of like up and coming and you do just like a standard movie review or just analyzing movies from some other perspective, you're usually going to get significantly less views. And so it's kind of like YouTube is sort of, I think, is like kind of pigeonholing people into doing very specific type of content. Like
it is easy content. It is. There's the reason why there's so many channels exactly like it pumping out the exact same video every day is because it's easy content in the algorithm, and getting people upset about, it's one thing to talk about a movie and your experience with the movie. It's another thing to talk about a movie and act like it's the end of civilization because of a greater narrative of,
right,
feminizing men and eating bugs and whatever we want to attach to it, right? Like when you attach these like your world is about to be crushed and society is under collapse, and like, regardless of varying degrees of truths or half truths or lies or whatever in any one of these subjects, that's how you get people to pay attention. It's how you get people fired up. Like, what do you think? Like, advertising in the US is like, hey, you're gonna fucking be ugly forever unless you get this product. You're gonna be fat for like a lot of just algorithmic things that get our attention are fear and anger based. What do you think Twitter is, right? So yeah, it's inevitable.
Yeah. CGP
But
Grey did a very good video on how anger and
yeah.
outrage is what generates the most things or most clicks. And I think the media's picked up on this, which is why so much of our media is focused that way. And I agree with you that there are channels that I see that seems like they do this sort of very easy analysis of everything being woke, and kind of that's kind of all they talk about. But on the flip side of that, I guess the question I would have is, do you think that filmmakers nowadays are intentionally putting more politics and culture war stuff into movies now, compared to the past, or has the type of political messaging in movies and TV changed over the last 10 years or so?
I think that it's very likely you could notice a trend like that, in the sense that in the same way that it's easy, lazy algorithmic content on YouTube to be talking about how everything's woke and blah 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 blah, right? You can notice it in your video manager, right? Like everybody who's ever made a YouTube video is like, "Ooh, this video is performing particularly well," right? And then it's whether or not you chase that. In the exact same way that exists for like fucking Disney, and perhaps maybe it's feeding into itself in the same way that they think they're getting more promotion because everybody freaks out about something when, Pixar, they have this article being like the first gay character for like the 7th time or whatever.
Right,
and it's just like in the background, the random non-human alien police officer mentions, I have a girlfriend at home, and it's like, I don't even know what gender they are, and that's all there is to it. And you can edit it out for the Russia release, you can edit out for the China release. So in 100%, at the very least, like marketing wise, it's happening more often. I think there's different trends that we see in writing over time. And if there's one thing that I'd like to, I guess, encourage for people consuming media, and especially film, is that if you're fed up with, Disney, there's a lot of other great things out there. And I think that, apparently some people in that audience got very upset that I would even consider suggesting that there's movies outside of ones that they know, and they think that that's a pretentious thing to say, and that I'm elitist, and that I go to film festivals that are just completely inaccessible to everybody, and it's rich people only and cocktails, even though Sundance has been online for the past 3 years. You could access it through a computer, and Joker is a fucking film festival movie. But it's to try and answer the question. It's really difficult for me to make it like a hard yes or a hard no, as I mentioned earlier. If we're talking about, like, how do you even measure that, right? Because there's so many movies being made every single day, studio or otherwise. It's easier to make a movie now than ever before. Fucking Joel Haver's making movies and just releasing them on YouTube. Tangerine, a very successful film at Sundance, filmed on a fucking iPhone 4. Right. So the barrier to entry is so much lower than ever before. So I don't even know how to quantify the ratio of how many movies are being overtly political compared to the past.
Well, when we're talking about like people's intuitions, I mean, like the average person, it'd be kind of, what are the normie tentpole movies that people are saying?
Star Wars.
Yeah. All the big, Star Wars, Barbie movie, the Disney movies, all these movies that are coming out, like, I'm assuming that's how people would judge whether they feel like movies are more political or not.
Yeah. So if we're going by Star Wars, and we consider,
when you say Star Wars, you mean everything. You don't just mean Star Wars, right? I mean like
Marvel, genre of the same. If you watch Star Wars, you watch other movies that,
yes. Okay. Gotcha.
The umbrella bubble, whatever. Sure, I think that you could say that, but it would also depend on how we define like political, right? It would also depend on like, is it inherently political? Like, I mean, technically everything is, but how political are we going to say is the way that a male versus female character is represented? And again, I'm not making a hard no, like, oh, every criticism that all these people say is wrong. I'm just saying from a nuanced perspective, or attemptedly nuanced perspective, trying to be, is something perceived as political more so because it is going against the grain and breaking a kind of tradition that we have, right? Is it more political for a certain gender of a certain character to be portrayed in a certain way because it's not the standard, or because it's not what we saw a decade ago?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that the inverse of that the standard for how we have seen characters portrayed, gender, sexuality, whatever, is it possible that that's also political, but because it's so normalized that most people would never even consider it to be that? That's an idea that I would like to at least get people to think about without making any hard conclusions, because I don't pretend to have answers on things, right?
I'd like to answer that.
Sure,
like
please.
I think what makes it political is when it's advocacy for something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously, you take a movie like Elysium. In Elysium, in the third act. Okay, well,
but please explain it.
In the third act, they're basically heavy-handedly advocating for universal health care.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like so heavy-handed that it nearly like jumps out of the movie screen and shakes you by the collar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a political advocacy thing more than it's going against tradition or something.
Okay, yeah, in that situation, that sounds like I wouldn't have any disagreement with that, because Saw 6 is political. It gets into the healthcare debate, but those are things where they're so explicitly political that there's no other way to even like describe them. Whereas I think that a lot of political conversations surrounding movies are ones where it's essentially just like, is this a norm or is it not a norm? And it involves either race or gender or sexuality, when, ideally, maybe in the future, maybe never, but in the type of world that I would like to see, it wouldn't even be considered political for, people are just people. It wouldn't have to be seen as a political statement for there to be a gay character in a fucking Disney movie or something.
Right.
But do you deny that a lot of times they are putting those gay characters in as a form of political advocacy? Like, I don't disagree with you that you can have gay characters in a movie, but I think one of the disagreements people have is that they're saying, look, this character is integrated in a way that is just uncomfortable. Like, it's so obviously political advocacy and not really story related. I mean, the point that you make about Disney is a perfect example. It's like, it's not even essential to the story. It's like some off-screen character that you see for 5 seconds that just walks in and says, "Oh, I'm gay and I have a husband. I'm a man and I have a husband."
I think that there's several layers to this. So in the marketing, they at least very much want you to believe that it's political advocacy, because they think that they'll get more sales and they can pretend to be like a good person, company, corporation, whatever. It's just, it's a corporation, right? They just want to sell things. It's money. That's the bottom line, right? That's one layer. You go further back, imagine like the creation process of an animation, right? There's so many different people working on so many different parts. We have to determine whether or not, however many writers worked on what was it? I don't even remember what the movie was called. Onward. However many writers worked on it. And was it a part of the lead writer, like the person that came up with the concept or the person that drafted the first script? Was it a part of their checklist to be like, and let's add one gay character? Or was there 1-2 employees at Disney or somebody that feels strongly enough about their own identity that they're like, let's see if we can get away with, like putting a gay reference in the movie? Because that's all that movie really amounted to, was literally just like, my girlfriend, and that was it. And maybe they were like, oh, let's record that line. Let's see if we can get it through enough people, and if anybody objects or if they don't object or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's a potential way that scenario can happen. So it really depends on the movie if we're going to try and be arguing like intent, like the overall intent of a gay character, as an example, being included in something, right? So, there's plenty of movies where that's the whole fucking story, right? Like the whole story is like, oh, this is a gay character. It's about their experiences as a gay character, right?
Philadelphia, like obviously you're gonna have some gay characters in that movie.
Fucking there's some every like couple of years there's like an Oscar movie about like a gay or trans person, and that's like that's one of the 10 movies or whatever. So yeah, you'd have to hear it from the writer, and depending on what type of project it is, like something that's like a fucking 20-person crew or 1,000-person crew, or like is it an A24 thing where the writer and director has complete creative control, or is it a Disney thing where they're like trying to micromanage everything and there's certain rules that you have to follow, blah 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 blah. There's no simple answer. And so when I criticize and try to bring more to the conversation on, let's just say the overall umbrella of culture war related movie channels, it's not to say like you're wrong. It's not to say there's no truth to anything you're saying. It's that there a lot of these types of channels are essentially providing really solid, easy answers for complicated questions that where there's a bit more to it than that. And that's
what is the easy answer? What do you think the easy answer that they're providing is?
The easy answer would be saying something like they're putting gay characters in your media to turn your kids gay and feminize men, or something like that, right?
Look, I don't necessarily think that's the message, though. That's what I'm contesting. I'm saying, look, it's as uncomfortable if they're advocating for gay marriage in a movie that has nothing to do with gay marriage as if they're advocating for universal health care in a sci-fi movie. Like that's the contention. And when people point out that contention, it's very easy to turn that into this straw man that, you hate gay people or you want, unhealthy people to die. Like,
oh yeah, I am not at all claiming that that's what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a spectrum of different people in this media space making different criticisms and commentaries, and there's a spectrum of different levels of good faith in terms of engaging with these conversations. And I believe, like, there's plenty of people making criticisms against political aspects appearing in movies, regardless of what political spectrum. I believe there's plenty of people making those criticisms in good faith, and that there's plenty of room for conversation to happen about that.
Do you think that there are movies, though? Like, I think an aspect of Critical Drinker's content is often he's saying movies are denigrating men, that they make a concerted effort to really put down men as a category. Do you think that that's true?
It probably is, depending on what types of movies you watch. But
right.
Yeah, I mean,
look, I don't necessarily think that those movies are like those movies shouldn't be made, or that, if man-hating feminists want to make movies about how men suck, they should definitely be able to make them. But I do understand that this is a part of Critical Drinker's popularity, is that he's pointing this out. He's saying, look, this filmmaker hates men more than they love filmmaking, and that is hurting their style of filmmaking. Would you agree that what's your perspective on Barbie? Because I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I've seen plenty of movies where I would completely agree with you. And the most egregious examples I've seen of them have been like independent fucking festival movies where it's like just somebody I'm like, you had a bad date and you're taking it like nobody wants to fucking talk to you. What are you even doing making movies, right? I don't disagree that that's happening, and I don't disagree that can be found, and there's examples of that in large budget mainstream movies, right? What is your take on Barbie? Because a lot of people were making those same criticisms against that movie,
as if it was coming from a man-hating place, but I really did not like that was such
There is a lot
very
of
nuanced movie.
There's a lot of man hating.
Wait,
in Barbie.
before you talk about whether Barbie
It
hates
didn't
men,
come from a hateful place for me.
Do you agree that Barbie is overtly political?
There's politics within Barbie.
Because I'd say that's one of the most overtly political mainstream movies I think I've seen in a long time.
Some people's videos, I think Critical Drinker's video, they were their perspective was that the movie tricked people into watching a political movie and that it wasn't going to be political. But it's like, I don't know, like if you know anything about the fucking like the people who made it, like if you're watching a Greta Gerwig, Noah Baumbach film.
Yeah, but the typical moviegoer doesn't know.
Yeah, they don't know who
anything about the filmmakers. Yeah. Look, and I want to bring it back to a point that you made. You said,
wait. But you agree?
Hold on, about a girl's doll, though. Like you can't like that. Of course, it's going to be like somewhat feminist, right?
One second, because we're in total agreement here. You have already said the thing that you don't like about these channels is that they're not clearly marked, as anti-woke.
Right.
They're not clearly marked as political. It's the exact same argument with Barbie. Like if Barbie is not clearly marked as political, it's the same thing.
I necessarily agree with that. I don't know if I necessarily agree that you should have a warning about the content of the movie that you're going to be watching unless you're explicitly trying to like go for that. Like if maybe you want to add like a section on IMDb right next to like the parents warning of like, does this movie have like sex in it? If you want to have like another website that tells you whether or not there's like talks about feminism or anything political, maybe there's a market for that website. But me, I like to go into movies blind anyway. Otherwise, just knowing who the directors are and
Well, I don't think it'd be about like a warning. It would be that the trailer intentionally didn't show any of the political elements to it. So people would go into it thinking, oh, this is like a silly Barbie movie and be like, what is this?
I don't know if I agree with that. I think that because you're acting as if the I don't think that the trailer was misleading in terms of what the core of the movie was. The movie had politics in it, and in terms of like the narrative, there were political statements being made that I thought were honestly pretty nuanced. I didn't think that it was coming from oh, men are the worst, and that was the whole point of the movie. Like it was equally critical against women, and it showed like toxic feminine behavior, and it was even the criticisms of men and women. The criticisms, they do exist, but they were not like malicious. They were not like needlessly combative. Like if Amy Schumer got her way and directed the movie, then we would have seen some, then that probably would have been the movie that where I would feel like a lot of these criticisms would be more accurate. But in terms of marketing a film, it's saying a lot to the same reasons I have these issues with the overall umbrella of culture war oriented easy answers and trying to attribute intent in a certain way to more complicated questions. Perhaps, maybe there was someone in the marketing department that said, don't let people know there's any feminism in this movie or any gender commentary or else no one will see it. That's possible, but I don't know if it's difficult to just say that confidently, when there's so many different reasons why a movie can be marketed in a certain way. Like so many movie trailers are vague, right? There are other movie trailers that spoil the whole movie. Like when I think of the experience of Barbie and I think about what I liked about the movie, when I see it again, I'm not seeing it again to go like, I can't wait until they talk about how some women feel like they have to live up to difficult standards. When I see the movie again, I'm thinking about the set design, how funny fucking Ryan Gosling was with Ken. I'm thinking about that great song that they had in the middle of it. right? Those are the selling points of the movie. Those are what I enjoyed about the movie and what I think most people enjoyed about the movie. It was universally, it broke records. It's not like it was a polarizing movie in terms of people enjoying it for the most part. So yeah, when they make a trailer for it, they're showing those parts. They're showing the selling parts, right? What like it.
Well, so
the
you said a lot.
experience the
Yeah.
experience of the movie was accurately represented in the trailer. When I
Okay.
think about the movie, I think about those parts.
Right. You said a lot of things I want to touch on.
Yeah.
But regarding the trailer
Sorry.
specifically, I mean, yeah, I can't, we can't read the mind of the marketing department where they, someone correctly say, okay, I think, Ken is going to be the big draw here because obviously I think he was for a lot of the audience, and the song is great and all that stuff. Or was it to like whether it was intentionally to hide the political or not? I mean, I don't know. I think you'd have to acknowledge that whether it's intentional or not, they did hide the political stuff. I mean, me and Adam, well, let me just finish it. Me and Adam, we cover a lot of woke stuff on the channel, and we're kind of involved on the culture war stuff. And when I saw the trailer for Barbie, I saw all the trailers leading up to it. It didn't even occur to me that this movie was going to be political from the trailers I saw. And I would think I would be kind of more sensitive to those things. And I remember when people were watching the trailers, people were really hyped for it. There was no one, I don't even remember like, when Mario was coming out, people were like, oh, it's going to be woke, like when all these movies come out, people were complaining it's going to be woke. I feel like Barbie kind of blindsided a lot of people. And that's kind of what also led to the reaction. So I think regardless of the intention, the trailer definitely did not show the political stuff that was going to happen in the movie.
Even if the film was not directed by Greta Gerwig and written by Noah Baumbach, I think that the idea of having a film made in 2023 about a girl's doll not saying anything remotely about gender is not a reasonable assumption to make. Well, I just think that's like that if you're alive in the universe right now, I don't know how you could not expect. I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm being kind of
no, I understand, but there's a difference between I agree. When I walked into, because I knew what was going on once all the reviews came out, but when I saw it, I would imagine that there'd be some kind of basic mainstream liberal idea about women can do more than just be pretty women who are homemakers. I mean I think everyone's expecting kind of a general level of a kind of a mainstream feminist politics in the movie. I'm not going to deny that, but I don't think people expected it to be the major plot of the movie is all about Ken bringing patriarchy to Barbie land and fighting the patriarchy, and the real world just being filled with sexist men, and that to just be such a central part of the movie. I don't think anyone expected that. I think it's wildly different than kind of just, oh, this is just 2023.
I think that if Amy Schumer directed the fucking movie, I would be agreeing with everything you're saying. That's the type of movie that she would have made, right? But I think that the way that things were handled, even though, yes, it is a major plot point of oh, I'm Ken and I just found out that I could do the patriarchy, and it's it's so the plot is written in a similar way to almost like the Lego movie, right? Where you watch the Lego movie and it's mostly just a bunch of non-serious satirical kind of jokes. And in Barbie, sure, they are using words like patriarchy, right? And they are, talking about real world issues. And depending on the type of person you are, if let's say, you're if let's say you're a woman watching the movie or a girl watching the movie, and you feel so strongly about your identity, and you're I really am having all these unreasonable expectations that men don't maybe that preachy part of the movie is going to be what stands out to them the most, right? But myself, I'm in it for the set design, I'm in it for the direction, I'm in it for the acting, I'm in it for the comedy, I'm in it for the writing, and not the writing necessarily in a what political points do they talk about and do I agree with, but in the sense of how the story is used. Because even when we get to the real world, I'm not sure if I'm, in my perspective, in my interpretation, I don't even think that's necessarily supposed to be like a one-to-one, like this is the real world, right? Like there's like Tim and Eric levels of absurdism when the chase scene happens. They're not even running real, right? Like it again, like the Lego movie where it's like a kid's fucking moving dolls or some shit, right? Like even the story, which is self-aware about how it's written, the story is written in such a way where it's almost like a boys versus girls like playground thing, right? And it feels nostalgic, and it feels like it is sort of invoking this like childhood, kids playing with dolls or whatever, sort of, the juvenile war between the sexes, right? I don't think that it was as serious as a lot of people that are making fear-based commentary on films. I don't think it's as serious as a lot of people are making it out to be, and I think that's my main point, right? Sure, the politics are there, but it's not like a serious political analysis. Is Greta Gerwig is a woman, and she wanted to include some things, and I thought that she was very, I thought that they were very nuanced about it. It easily could have become something needlessly divisive and needlessly like man-hating and malicious, but I don't think it was.
I mean, I half agree with what you're saying, because I agree that the movie was shot and the way like the politics, not all of it, but a lot of politics were handled were in this kind of very childlike boys versus girls in the playground. I mean, that was the impression, that's why Ken thinks patriarchy is like, it's like a child's version idea of the patriarchy. I get all that, but then it gets kind of confused because the movie itself, like literally the way in which the women are, like the way in which it's portrayed, even though it's through a joke, it is portrayed using like classic feminist theory. Ken comes into the society, he basically brainwashes women to accept the patriarchy, and the way that the women are freed from it is by speaking truth to power. So even though it's kind of done in this silly way, it's still operating according to these, classical feminist principles and political principles. And I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a very interesting interview between Greta Gerwig, Margot Robbie, and whoever's interviewing them. And the interviewer's asking about, the feminism of the movie. And Margot Robbie says, oh, well, I don't like that everyone just says it's feminism. That's just one slice of the pie. It's about a lot of things. And when she says that, Greta Gerwig looks at her with this like befuddled look on her face. Like she's like complete disbelief. And she says, well, it's a pretty big slice of the pie. And then laughs in Margot Robbie's face, as if like to say that the movie is just this massively feminist movie.
I would like to add to that, because one thing that I think people often forget when talking about something like feminism is that the word feminism is about as useful as the word Christianity, where one person might call themselves a feminist and it means something entirely different than another person calling themselves a feminist, right? So if Greta Gerwig says the entire movie is about feminism, there's nothing to suggest that she might not be one of those people that thinks that feminism also tackles men's issues and is critical of women and like we've been around, we've heard all sorts of different definitions of feminism, right? So I still think that, even if she believes the entire movie is about feminism and nothing else, that still leaves room for what I'm saying. So I would like to add to the idea, you mentioned how the problems got solved and Ken brainwashes women to do patriarchy and blah, 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 blah. But remember what ultimately comes of that is for them to essentially take things back, for women to get things back. They do this sort of like weird, manipulative, sort of toxic femininity thing where they're like, oh, I would love to hear you about your song. And they kind of manipulate the men in a way where I don't think the movie is doing this in an unironic, non-self-aware way. And I think that there are some clues in the film that support this. The song that they use, Push by Matchbox 20, not only is it nostalgic for, millennials watching the movie, just being, I want to push you around. And it's, that whole like sad rock genre that everybody loves to make fun of right now. Not only is it funny in terms of the tone and how it's used in the film, but the actual backstory of the song. It's a song where it was widely criticized when it was out on the radio because the knee-jerk interpretation of the lyrics was, "You're pushing around a woman? You're pushing around a woman?" And so Matchbox 20 got a lot of fucking heat over that until they came out in an interview and they said, "No, this is about the character is being pushed around by his girlfriend. And this song is about women abusing men." And so for that song to be used in that context, in that scene in the film, I think that there's an argument you could make that it is kind of self-aware and it is kind of nuanced and it is maybe trying to say a few things at once, which I think is really interesting.
Well, to me, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I can't read Greta's mind. I mean,
Exactly.
maybe, right. Like maybe she knows that. I didn't know that going into that the movie about the interpretation of the push. But I know when I was reading articles and people talking about it, I mean, I didn't see for all the articles I saw praising it, I didn't see a single article mention that interpretation of the song or the intention of the song. So even if I would argue, and I mean, I hate to argue death of the author, but I would argue that even if that's like her intention, it's weird to me that it's so subtle when like the feminist part of it, the kind of the more classical, blatant feminist part about it is so just apparent in your face. And yet the idea that the Barbies are doing something wrong with kind of manipulating the Kens is this like hyper subtle thing that, you know, I don't know who knows this small fact about the song.
No, I don't think that what I'm saying isn't like non-existent without the background of the song. That's just like a supporting little tidbit detail that who knows, maybe is intentional, maybe not. I think that throughout the film, there's similar messages sprinkled in even more explicit ways. Like one of the characters literally just says like, maybe patriarchy is just a word that women came up with to explain something and it doesn't actually exist. Like the film is sure. I would say like, if we're going to argue like points for women, points for men in terms of like the gender critical elements, it's at least like 60-40, right? At the very least. But I think the movie does a really great job at not just being one-sided and not just only addressing like, oh, men are bad and there's no problems with women. It's like it's something that tries really hard to be nuanced. It tries really hard to provoke a conversation without being just trash. So,
I mean, like to me, it's I don't know. I kind of like vehemently disagree because, like, if the movie was supposed to be more nuanced or supposed to be more kind of like just funny and not so overtly political, like when she goes to the real world, it wouldn't be that every man was just like sexist against her the way they portrayed it in the movie. It would be more like her experience of the world would just be different because she's used to living in this Barbie world. Where she's the center of attention. Ken's experience would be weird because suddenly people are not treating him like a door holder. And then you could still have the exact same movie where basically, you know, he wanders onto some protest and some people are protesting about something and someone yells something about the patriarchy to him. And then he goes and looks it up and goes back. But I feel like if the real world was just portrayed like normal and then you had everything else, I'd be more inclined to believe this. But just to me, I get what you're saying about how, you know, in the Mattel studio, which that scene was so out of place and bizarre. I don't even know how to hold it in my mind where they're all kind of like running in circles because it seems so detached from the rest of the movie. But everything else in the real world, except for that one scene, it's like everything's kind of normal-ish, but everyone's very sexist. And to me, that's kind of strikes me as unusual.
I will say no because the you know, the first when somebody slapped her ass at the beginning, I was kind of like, oh, are they really like going into that? I was kind of leaning in your direction. But then like very quickly you see things like they fucking like they steal shit and then they go to jail and then they get released immediately. And it's just like it's
California. What do you mean?
That's funny.
That is realistic.
Like, I think that even though they have something in the movie called the real world, like it's not like a serious, dramatic, like one-to-one representation of reality. Like it's still so tongue-in-cheek. The tone of the film is still so playful, and you know they don't even attempt to interject real world logic into things. Like if this was a movie that was trying to be like this is the real world, then they would probably have some sort of convoluted explanation for how they're traversing between Barbie and real world. They'd probably have some sort of like, oh, they have a shrink ray that they made and blah, 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 blah. They don't even bother with that because it's very clearly just supposed to be like, not real, right?
Well,
like, you throw the rules out the window and they're aware of it, and you're not even asking for the rules because it's clear that they know that they're doing it in a way where you're not supposed to be asking about the rules.
Well,
it's not something that they're not aware of.
It's still a comedy movie. It's supposed to be a comedy movie. Things are supposed to be silly. Obviously the idea you can skate to Barbie world is ridiculous and all this stuff.
Exactly.
But I assume you would still, without going like 100% saying, okay, like the Barbie world is like completely fiction, the real world is 100% real. I mean, I assume you would agree that the real world is still portrayed to be more realistic than the hyper fantasy that is the Barbie world.
It depends on how we define the word realistic. I mean, it's
well,
literally
if you put
just
things on let's put it on a spectrum, okay? I assume you'd agree that the real world and Barbie movies
for the
be
purposes of the story, it's but I don't know.
It would have to be, otherwise the story wouldn't make sense.
What we're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so, but do you see the Barbie movie was interesting too, because I feel like the politics, and this kind of goes to what Adam was saying earlier, the other Adam was saying earlier, was that I feel like the politics detracted from the story in Barbie, because you basically have this weird situation where, I mean, Barbie doesn't even feel like the protagonist for most of the movie. The person that has kind of the very recognizable, understanding, quest and empathy is Ken in the beginning of the movie. And then once Barbie kind of goes to the real world and then comes back, it's kind of like America Ferrera becomes the protagonist. I mean, she's the one that solves the conflict of the story. Barbie doesn't really do anything at that point. And then at the end, they have the whole thing with like, oh, she goes off to be a real girl, when that was never really established except for one scene where she's sitting on a park bench. Beyond that, that was never really established to be her goal at any point in the movie. And I feel like if they had kind of, instead of like got rid of a lot of the feminist politics stuff and instead, have Barbie being in the real world, and maybe, you could still have that scene where she gets bitched at by the kid and she's sitting on the park bench, instead of her just like looking at people and just seeing them and having some kind of epiphany, maybe that old woman like actually has a conversation with her and seems very wise or something. And she's like, oh, wow, like you're so wise. And, Barbie can't go over like having an actual real conversation with a person for the first time. And there could even be a joke there about like, oh, well, how old are you? And the woman says how old she is. And Barbie's like, well, I'm even older than you, but she's like an immortal child. And so like, she kind of understands that maybe there's more to life than these like vapid plastic, conversations and experiences that she had in the Barbie world. And to me, that would have been a much better movie than just what this was.
Gender politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the level of which someone is going to be affected by the political angles or the political presence in this film is probably going to have to do with two things: whether or not it's like you think the movie's agreeing with you, and also whether or not you're like particularly sensitive to it. Because I don't know, I watch I don't believe in God. There's plenty of movies where it's like God exists in that universe. I don't go like, oh man, can't enjoy this movie now. Like it's operating on those principles of or like there's certain given realities that I disagree with that in the context of the movie is a reality in the film. There's sometimes I'll watch a movie.
Hold on a second. Adam, what if it's like a kid's movie that smuggles in this concept of God and is really trying to sell people on, you need to believe in Jesus or your eternal soul is damned? Because you're an adult, obviously, but if it's a kid's movie, it's a completely different scenario.
If you're traumatizing children, whether it's religiously or otherwise, I would say that that's probably bad, and maybe people should be a bit more responsible with.
That's kind of the critique here, is that and this is why Ben Shapiro is Ben Shapiro is basically providing a service here. He's saying, look, the movie system doesn't tell you how politically charged a movie is, and maybe you don't want to send your kids to it if it's too politically charged, if there's all these subversive messages in that we don't actually agree with. I'm going to review the movie and give you a scale on wokeness and tell you whether or not you should send your kids to it. Which I mean,
if people want to use Ben Shapiro's metrics for whether or not your kid could see the movie, that's perfectly fine thing to do if you want to raise your kid that way. Well, you can homeschool your kid. You have, as a parent, you have whatever rights you want to expose your kid to whatever sort of political ideas or You know,
Look, Christians do the same thing. Like Christians rate movies. They have like a Christian scale, the Christian whatever. They watch the movie and they give it a certain number of doves, a certain number of dove ratings.
Yeah.
You
Oh my
know the
God.
scale. So
I know exactly what that is, and it was so funny because Cool Cat got rated on that, and they listed bestiality because Daddy Derek is dating the fucking mama cat. It was so funny.
That's fine.
So, but look, I don't think there's a lot of disagreement between us as far as the different what some people would call woke, the different aspects of the movie that are woke. You would say, look, we're all adults, we can see it, we can understand it, you know, it should be allowed in movies, we shouldn't keep it out of movies. But at the same time, people should be aware of it, it should be properly labeled. And if the filmmakers are not going to label it, there are other people out there like Critical Drinker, like Ben Shapiro, who are going to label it.
Sure.
And that's fine, right? Okay, so Sitch, can we move on to something else, or do you want to continue?
I would love to move on to something else.
Sure.
I would just like to mention right at the end, you know, like, I don't know if you were trying to like attribute Barbie to that conversation, but it was a PG-13 film. As I just wanted to make sure that was.
Well, I know
the point of it though is that the politics is not in the PG-13 rating. The politics are being smuggled in without the rating.
I don't think that there are very many movies that have a lower than PG-13 rating that are as overtly political as the Barbie movie. And I don't like if there's the existence of a gay character in one line in a Pixar movie, I don't know if that's, you know, if you want to shield your children from that, you have every right to, but I don't think that it's something to be concerned about on a level other than personal.
Well, I don't either. Look, I think you should be able to send your kids to R-rated movies. But different people have different, different appetites for that kind of thing.
Yes.
So I one of the other arguments that I think, and you guys kind of touched on it in the writing portion of what you were saying, is I think Critical Drinker is making an argument, and a lot of these other, you'd call them woke channels. I guess we still haven't even really defined woke, but who cares?
Exactly.
They're making an argument that these bad writers are being promoted because of their ideology over their ability to do good storytelling or entertaining movies. So do you agree with that? What's your take on that argument?
I would agree with that in the sense that it's a part of a greater problem of the people funding the films not having any idea how to create art. So when the metrics that they have is like, okay, is this person, going to say something on Twitter to get themselves canceled or whatever, and they choose someone that they think is politically safe over someone who isn't. Like, I don't know who's even in the list of people that are being hired. I don't know how many applications are being sent. I think most people working in fucking Hollywood is just a result of nepotism and social climbing and shoulder rubbing, right? That's the biggest problem, right?
Basically.
So
if you voted for Trump, you're off the project.
Yeah, maybe, but like I think I don't know, if you look at the demographics of Los Angeles and that's where most movies are being made, then it's kind of inevitable that would be the case either way, right? So
So this is like a common critique that Critical Drinker will make that you actually agree with then.
I think like every one of his critiques, I think that there's some truth in it, but I wouldn't agree with necessarily the overall framing or conclusion. Okay. So I'm again doing my classic yes and no answer at the same time.
I guess it's a little unfair for me to I don't look. There's a kind of pro-felicity thing that goes on in this as well. Like, is it bad for you to agree with Critical Drinker? Is it
no? And you watched my whole 2-hour long stream, 2.5 hour long stream.
It seemed
and I was like, you know what? There were points where I was like, I agree. Right.
Okay.
And, like there were points where someone in my chat would say something, and I'd be like, no, I don't think that he doesn't love movies. Right. I was defending him so many different instances, and I somehow Yeah, I've already said this, but like that audience in that 9 hour stream, which I'm not even sure they watched, he came out with some very different interpretations.
Well, kind of going back to what you were saying, which was true, or part of it's true.
Mhm.
The idea that how people determine whether movies are political or not can be derived from whether something violates a norm. And I
Yeah,
think the Lego movie is kind of an interesting example because, even though the Lego movie does have political themes, we don't perceive it that way because the political themes were like anti-conformity, finding your place in society, individualism. And I mean, these are all kind of like classic American values. So we're not really perceiving it that way. But I think that has a lot to play with why people will look at, Little Mermaid and say, oh, they get upset because it's race swapped, or some other movie that has the gender swapped. And I actually, I made the very first YouTube video I ever made, which is awful, and no one should ever watch it because it's awful. No one should ever watch anyone's first video because it's usually really bad. But
We're bringing
was
it
about
up in the watch
yeah,
together.
no. Was about this topic, and I think it was sort of about the female Ghostbusters movie.
Mhm.
And I was saying how, if that movie had come out in like 2007, no one would have cared about like complaining if it was woke or SJW was the term at the time or anything like that. They'd just be like, oh, they just gender swapped the Ghostbusters. And like people would see it and they'd still hate it because it wasn't very good, but they wouldn't complain about like the politics of it. It's only that because we exist in this environment where there's this perception that there's this culture going on that
Yeah.
people see these movies where there's the sex swapped or the race swapped, and it's seen to them as like, oh, well, there's another, feather in the cap of the woke. And I think
Yes.
that's why people get very upset by it.
Things are a bit more hyper politicized, and these conversations for sure existed, but just kind of like in smaller pockets and less organized when, before the internet was widely accessible and used by everyone and everyone's grandmother at this point, right? So, things have become way more hyper politicized in a way. The way I kind of see a lot of these conversations, and a lot of these, again, I'm just going to talk about this vague bubble that Critical Drinker may or may not be a part of, but I'm not going to say because I don't know, because I haven't seen every single one of his videos, and people are going to, heels versus babyface or something, right? Or that other guy that I can't remember every one of their names, but we all know that it's a thing, whether or not we want to say an individual channel's name, right? We all agree that it's a thing. I see it the same way that I would see a channel like talking about movies, essentially gaming the algorithm. I don't know if that's a fair word, gaming, or, exploiting the algorithm or using the algorithm to their benefit. If every single video, let's say 80% or something, if 80% of their videos and their conversations about movies and art were about like, and this is how conservatives are destroying the world, right? Like you can have political conversations in media, media analysis, but there's something that irks me in the same way that a lot of these people that I'm criticizing would say movies are too political now. I would say, the entire sphere of movie discussion is too political now. And then they would argue that that's a direct byproduct, and then blah, 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 and nothing ever gets accomplished, and blah, 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 blah.
Well, do you feel that the left and the right politically have changed over the last 8 to 10 years and what they used to be? How do you think they've changed?
Well, I mean, what I think that historically over time, generally, societies become more left-leaning in the sense that a lot of positions, if it was a conservative position in like 1950 to just be like rabidly anti-gay marriage, and now it seems like most conservatives, at least in Western countries, are like fine with it, and it's more of a freedom, like to each their own sort of thing, right? So I think in a lot of ways, societies do, progressively, if we want to use that word, tend to get more left-leaning as time goes on. It's just a reflection of change, right? I feel like in the past 10 years, perhaps as a byproduct of the internet and the hyper politicization of conversations and just the Twitterification of conversations and how no one has real conversations and everyone's behind a fucking computer screen and 200 character limit and everybody's just incentivized to dunk on everyone else. Perhaps because of that, I feel like conversations have gotten more charged in like weird ways where I wish people would just like calm down and realize like, hey, you can disagree and not like think that it's like an actual war.
Mhm.
I think that conservatives, not every conservative, there's plenty of reasonable conservatives, but I think that the threshold for what is considered mainstream conservative political discussion 5 years ago was like fringe conspiracy shit, right? A lot of some of the shit that when Tucker Carlson was still on Fox News a year ago,
Mhm.
and some of the stuff that is in like actually being parroted and repeated by like Republican politicians in the United States is something that would be considered extreme fringe conspiracy like Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about like Jewish space lasers and shit. Like she's walked that back, but like there's a very, from at least what I can interpret, and no one has an objective interpretation of anything, but like from what it seems to me, it seems like the things have gotten a lot more I don't know if extreme is the right word, but like just where's the standard? Where's the standard?
Mhm.
It seems like it's decorum's gone out the window. It seems like there's no belief that's too fucking crazy for it to be considered like a mainstream Republican political talking point, at least by some politician, or in a way where it's like, how do you have a job? Like you should to find this 5 years ago by someone, you'd have to go to like some random forum off in the like just you wouldn't see it in mainstream political discussion. You wouldn't see it on
Right.
Twitter. You wouldn't see it on
Yeah.
Fox News. You wouldn't see it in Congress, right?
You had Rush Limbaugh though forever, always talking about how liberals were destroying society and hated America and all that. It seems like that's as old as time.
That's not my example. I'm talking about like actual. I'm talking about like
you're talking about the marrying of Rush Limbaugh.
I'm talking about the people that like are fucking think that the warning test will like trigger a something in the vaccine to turn people into like zombies or like
the conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, and like a lot of conspiracy theories, sure, there's like a kernel of truth in like parts of what some of these people are saying, and that's why they propagate so easily. But I don't know what's happening.
Do you buy into any of the conspiracy theories on the left?
The conspiracy theories on the left? You'd have to give an example.
Well, I mean, the left used to be the ones that were super vaccine hesitant. Like the whole vaccines cause autism, I think, started on the left. I mean, I don't know how you feel about white supremacy being like a systemic force in society. I mean, that seems a little conspiracy to me.
That type of conversation is like in the same realm as like defined feminism, right? Where it's like, what do you even define as like white supremacy,
totally.
right?
But that's what makes it a conspiracy, right? Is the patriarchy a conspiracy? Do you believe the patriarchy exists?
It depends on how you define it.
Well, if you if you define
it's like if someone said like, do you think the deep state exists? It's like, well, how do you define?
I think the difference between the examples that you've brought up is like you're talking about like political sort of labels of like how someone might use a word to describe an existing structure in society, right?
Sure.
Like,
but
whereas I'm talking about like the fucking anti-vax, like Jewish cabal, like I'm talking about like very easily debunkable, verifiable things. Like I mentioned vaccines when I was on the EFAP critical drinker thing. They didn't want to go into it. Perfectly fine. They're not wrong for not wanting to go into it. But because I mentioned vaccines in the initial critical drinker video, and I talked about how Russell Brand is like kind of like an anti-vax conspiracy theorist. immediately in the comments section on the EFAP page, even though, I don't know if their channel is branded as apolitical or whatever, like at least they tried to be, I think. But it seemed there's like top comments on that where people are like, oh, Adam trusts the science, he trusts the vaccine, let's hope he's not one of the 1 in 35. And so immediately, because I'm a person with a brain and it's really not that difficult, I go, okay, what is this thing they're talking about 1 in 35? And I copy the text and I paste it into my browser, and I use a search engine, which everybody has access to. And I go, what is the 1 in 35 statistic COVID? And I find immediately
myocarditis
debunking of that information. It's a misinterpretation of data. Like if you want to go like, oh, 1 in 35 people had an adverse reaction to the vaccine, right? That's very different than saying 1 in 35 people are going to like actually die from the vaccine. The data that existed, I just want to make this absolutely clear.
Okay.
The data that existed was that I think it was 35. 1 in 35 people reported some adverse effect of some kind, in a way where how the information was collected, they were supposed to report anything, regardless of whether or not it was related to the vaccine. Somebody stubs their toe, right? Somebody gets in a car accident, right? Like, and if we look at the amount of vaccines that were rolled out, I'm pretty sure at this point in time, it was like mostly old people getting it anyway, that were like a year away from dying, right? Like, it's so frustrating how easy it is for people to misinterpret data in a way. And
Adam, we're running out of time, and
we'll move on.
I don't want to get sidetracked on.
Well, no, but wait, I have to respond to this because I mean, I
Please
agree.
Be quick. Please be brief.
No, I'm not going to be quick. Don't we have another half an hour or 40 minutes?
We have another guest coming on in an hour, and I have like 5 other things.
Okay, but this is very important. Okay, which is, I mean, I agree. I don't think it's a left-right thing. I don't think anyone interprets data correctly, or they interpret data in a way that pushes whatever argument they want forward. And I think the reason that we're in the situation that we're in is, I've said this a million times, is because of the housing crash basically destroyed people's confidence in the American system and the American economy. And, we saw that's where kind of the Tea Party started. And then the lefts, though, they still had confidence, with Obama. Obama was going to come in. He was going to bring in hope and change. He was going to change everything. Obama doesn't really change much to a lot of people's liking. And then I think a lot of those people were kind of latching on to Bernie, and Bernie being the person to bring change. And then obviously he loses to Hillary, who is kind of seen as like business as usual, going back to the old thing. And I think this explains exactly what you're talking about. The reason that conspiracies become more popular, the reason that institutions break down is populism, is that on the left and the right, there's this populist energy that's kind of rising up that's saying all of our institutions are untrustworthy, they're all broken, blah, 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 blah.
Healthy skepticism is great, but...
Sure, but obviously it goes too far in the other direction. But kind of regarding, and while I don't believe in the COVID conspiracies or anything of that nature, and there are definitely a lot of people on the right that do push a lot of conspiracies. But as Adam was saying, I do think there is a lot of conspiracies on the left that get ignored, and it becomes kind of this how are we defining things? Because it's like, the way that they talk about white supremacy, what does that mean? And a lot of people, I think, on the left intentionally define it in a very vague way. When you try to kind of hone down on it, there's this idea that like, well, every, any part of our society and our system, since it was created, hundreds of years ago by people that had slaves, therefore there must be some kind of racism embedded in the system. Therefore that racism is manifesting today. A lot of it is a conspiracy theory basically generated to excuse or explain any sort of difference in results in terms of, especially economics stuff, regardless of whether there's actually any proof to show that it's happening or not.
Well, I mean, this would just fall under the umbrella of like, there's conversations to be had about like equity and inequality. A lot of it is based on, economic status. Some people have made the argument that, historically, depending on your race, you might have a different starting point because of your economic status, because of things like redlining, because of the fact that, people were slaves, right? And so if people are going to have this conversation, I agree that it is like kind of politically charged to say something as, non-nuanced as like every white person is racist or every white person is inherently a white supremacist, right? I just don't even I don't consider those to be like real political discussions or debates. But I think
Yeah, but do you think it's weird that like so much of the online left movement right now? I mean, like I think the biggest political streamer is Hassan. He's an open socialist. I mean, it's strange to me that socialism has grabbed on such a stranglehold on a lot of young left people online when socialism is basically just rooted around a series of conspiracies.
I mean, he calls himself a socialist. I don't know if he is one, but
he's 100% a social. Well, okay, he does not live the life, if that's what you mean. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like,
yes. Right. But in terms of what he's preaching and what he's talking about, he is 100% a socialist, and he's even openly talked about how he wants to like slowly kind of sucker liberals down the pathway to becoming socialists through his content.
Most people that have any like actual political power, like institutionally, in the United States, I don't think are as far left as Hassan.
I agree.
Or as dumb.
I agree. Yeah.
So yeah, just to bring it back to my statement earlier, like you've given a lot of examples, and I'm not saying there aren't any conspiracy theories on the left or anything. Obviously there are. Obviously there's bad ways of thinking on, no matter what political perspective or alignment or identity you have. All I'm saying is that like mainstream talking points by people who actually have power in the Republican Party are trying to convince people that like the election didn't happen.
Sure.
like that it's verifiably not only debunkable, but it has been debunked, and anybody that cares enough about what they're saying can find this information, and they've convinced themselves that it's like, oh, you don't know because you didn't watch this BitChute video. And it's like, I entertain it, and I go and I watch the BitChute video, and then I look for something contradicting that BitChute video, and I find easily like, oh, this is an easy explanation for that shit. Where's the BitChute video? Like, where's their debunking of the debunking? It stops at people debunking their shit. And so it's that, like, in a lot of these cases with shit like the vaccine shit and shit like the election conspiracy shit, they've stopped at them and their supposed debunking of the original information. And it seems like either they haven't seen or are unaware of or don't want to acknowledge that somebody's debunked their shit, and then there's no line after that point. And it's like, okay, well, what? Anyway, yeah, we can move on to another subject.
Well, yeah, I just want to say one last thing about this was that.
Okay, good.
I mean, we've talked a lot about going, debunking or going against the narrative regarding the election. I mean, we were talking about that on Sunday.
Oh yeah,
at the end of the show.
Make sure people know that. Look,
yeah,
we're not election conspiracy theorists here.
But in terms of like the debunking, like it's there. It's unfortunately because when I do these deep dives, it's a never-ending rabbit hole of people debunking the debunk, and it just kind of goes on forever until eventually you get to the point of, well, they're lying because it's part of the conspiracy. But I just want to say, in terms of like broader conspiracies on the left, I would say that I mean, I agree with you because there is a lot of different conspiracies that exist on the right that exist more in politics, where I'd argue a lot of the left conspiracies exist more in academia. There was one that did have a pretty profound impact, and I would say that was the BLM idea, which was that, the police are running around shooting all these unarmed black men, when in reality, when you actually looked at the numbers, very easily debunkable, there was like, I don't know, it was like 11 or something, 20. I don't know. It was 11. Like it was a very low number compared to what like the perception was when they would poll people. People assumed, majority of people I think thought it was over 100 or 1,000 unarmed black men had been killed. Yeah. And it's like that conspiracy, that idea, led to all this unrest and rioting and et cetera, et cetera.
And also that was during COVID and people were like fucking pissed about a lot of things.
That is true.
And there was so much going into like that moment in history that,
Sure. And I mean, you probably remember at the time, it was really weird because it was like there were a bunch of people protesting the COVID lockdowns, and they'd come out and the media would be like, oh my God, these people are outside. They're spreading COVID. They're so responsible. And then when the BLM protests started, they're like, listen, we did the research and it's actually totally fine for people to be outside protesting.
I will 100% agree. There was a lot of needlessly and also admittedly intentionally contradictory information from government institutions that people are supposed to be able to trust that were just not providing accurate information about shit at the beginning of COVID, and that wound up making it difficult for most people to
all right
trust them
let's
after
move
that
on.
point. But yeah,
We also have a bunch of super chats too, Sitch. So, and I feel like obviously. So, but I look in your video, you were making you basically said you don't know why people like Critical Drinker. You were hypothesizing why people like Critical Drinker. So I just like I go ahead.
Sorry,
You want to
I was
to that?
I was essentially I was going down this path, being like, here's what I heard about him. Here's my anecdotal experience with somebody. You know, I've seen maybe a couple videos, and then the purpose of the live stream is like, let me just hear him talk.
Why
let me just see what's up.
Yeah, why? Well, you said it several times in the live stream, like, why do people like Critical Drinker? And so I was thinking, hey, I know why people like Critical Drinker, but I talked. So basically, I set aside three things, and we talked about one, the hidden political content in movies. I think they feel like Critical Drinker is exposing this hidden political content that a lot of people are on the left, and they don't necessarily like. It's not really hidden political content to them because they agree with it in the same way that a Christian is not going to be offended if a movie is overtly selling Christianity because they're like, I like Christianity. Christianity should be sold. Like, no big deal. Which I think you and I are of the same position that, you know, it's like it should be labeled. There are different institutions that are labeling it like it's not really as big a deal as people are making it out to be, and people should be able to make movies however they want to make movies. So there's that one. There's the bad writing. The second reason I think Critical Drinker is popular is because he's pointing out that bad writers are being promoted because of ideology over good storytelling. So he's saying the product itself is tangibly suffering from this kind of political ideology where people are promoting their friends, which we talked a little bit about, but I really want to go on to the third thing because it's like a huge thing. The degrading of beloved characters. You yourself said, you know, you have a very a deep personal connection, I think you said, with film. And I do understand that there are a lot of people, they have a deep personal connection with these films like Star Wars, like, you know, Marvel. They grew up with these characters. They feel like they know them, like they're best friends with these characters. And then these characters are being reimagined in a way that they feel is degrading to the characters. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I'll let you give your perspective first.
Well, I mean, so there's examples that I can come up with where, you know, the characters in Unbreakable. By the end of Glass, like that, I couldn't have imagined a more disrespectful and unceremonious way to end their story. Right?
Is that a character that's beloved though? Is that a character like
by me? I was talking about my own personal.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I'm talking about specifically like characters like Luke Skywalker that's been around since 1970.
Okay. Yeah. So I think where we might disagree, I haven't really heard your take on this, but it's something that I kind of like was starting to realize in the conversation with EFAP is that there is, with many people, a very strong sense of like, I guess the idea of these characters is almost kind of like an institution.
Right.
To be respected, when I'm not sure I view characters in that way. And like, I have emotional and personal connections with art and characters within art, in ways that I feel are like very significant and important. But I'm also not really of the idea that there's much that is like sacred, I guess, anyway. So if I see a character, let's talk about like Neo from the Matrix, right? Would that fall under something similar? Because I felt like the new Matrix, let's
the Matrix...
get it started or whatever. It's that was just an absolute terrible, awful film. You know, whether or not it like disrespected the character, it was just like it was so cringe.
True.
And I hate it, but I can still, you know, I still can just rewatch the original movies. And when I look at something like that, sure, I made a video about it. Sure, I dunked on Lana Wazowski and, you know, the people that made it. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of just like, that's a missed opportunity. If you're going to make another film, here's how you could have made it better. Sad that we'll never see that other film that could have existed. But I don't feel like attacked in a way where like some sort of sacred institution is being violated, which is the kind of the impression that I get from people at this point, or kind of what I'm learning is how some people think when a character in that they love is not handled properly.
Yeah. Is there any character that you would feel that way? Like if they, like, I don't know, if they ruined Lion King or something that you really like?
I mean, they did.
Yeah. Well, did that affect you? Did you feel it, have that feeling?
Well, I made a big breakdown about what they did wrong and how they could have done it right and what didn't work about it. But here's the thing, like, even so, seeing The Lion King 2019 and just how much they it's like my least favorite movie ever, right? Seeing just how much they disrespected, my favorite characters,
right, gave
me a newfound love and appreciation for the originals in ways where I was able to be like, not only does this new thing suck so much, but I know now what works so well about the original in ways that I didn't before. Not saying I didn't know anything about why the original worked, but now I know more about it. Now I can really like appreciate details in terms of like how characters are revealed in the like the thing I was talking about with Zazu, right? Like I didn't notice that before I was doing that side by side comparison of the scenes. And so I was able to get a newfound appreciation for the things that I do love. Now, in some alternate universe where, they made a Lion King 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 or whatever,
right,
and they were all fucking just as good as the original, that's ideal for me.
Right.
Sad that that's not the universe that I live in, but I don't know. I still, that's just kind of existing on the planet and understanding art is not going to, trying to replicate lightning in a bottle. And, especially what I was saying earlier with just like the money not going to the artists and blah, blah, blah.
Is it wrong that people...
Let me just say, I agree. Like obviously it's like a healthier attitude to kind of try to not be so affected by those things. But I think another element too is just that for a lot of these characters that people did like, I mean, I don't personally have any of these attachments to this stuff because I'm autistic, but for the people that do have these attachments to these characters, I think it's not just that they see that the character is kind of like murdered or, brought back and, they desecrate them. Luke Skywalker is always the classic example, but then it's like they see a bunch of people cheering that on and then saying like, oh, if you don't like this, it's because you're, immoral in some fashion or some kind of bigot.
Oh,
I'm assuming that didn't happen with Lion King.
There's so many. Well, you could argue actually.
Did it? Did that happen?
There's certain arguments that you could make about that. They did replace a lot of white actors with black actors, not the other way around. That's not really something I focused on in my review. But if you wanted to get into that genre of commentary on film, that you could make those commentaries on the Lion King. But I agree with the word you used. It's like, what did you say? Healthier? It's probably healthier to not. Yeah. And I'm not saying, people can't really. I mean, yes and no. People can't control their emotions all the time. You can try to. You can be a bit more introspective about yourself. And if you're finding yourself really emotionally charged up about something in a way that is unproductive or harmful or making your life worse, then perhaps there can be a point of reflection where you can try and think, is this something that I can try to control? I think that when we're looking at characters as institutions, not saying that you shouldn't or that you can't or that, I think that we're in a very unprecedented point in time where the entire concept of children being raised on television and media is entirely experimental and nobody even fucking talks about that shit, right? Like how many years back do we have to go before we realize like, oh, kids didn't just grow up watching movies and like Pokemon and all these like advertisements telling you that you need to love something and that it's the most important thing in the world, right? Like we've all been fucking brainwashed. We're all part of this generation where we're brainwashed essentially to have unhealthy emotional attachments to brands and to characters in ways where like I would hope, I think that it's probably healthy to, even if you love a certain brand and love a certain character, there's characters that I'm obsessed with, right? Even if you are obsessed with a character, to maybe try not to have that emotionally negatively affect you in a way where it's like ruining your day. And maybe try to think about whether or not it's productive or helpful. To it's fine if you want to make a criticism. It's fine if you're passionate enough about it that you want to make a video yelling about it or whatever. But and again, maybe this is more of a commentary on communities rather than it is about like individual content creators. But some people, it feels like everything that they see is through the lens of some sort of war, right? Whether that's the culture war or whatever we want to call it. And I'm like, just calm down.
Is it? Look, I think they would say the same thing about the content creators, the people who are making these movies. They feel like they're seeing this property through the lens of some chess piece in a political war. I mean, that's why they want to put these messages into these movies.
I will say that there's so many things going into, there's so many people working on different movies. Like it's difficult for me to say that that's the answer of like, that's why any particular movie is it. Like it would have to be like a case by case basis.
Sure,
right?
sure. And obviously, we can't read their minds and stuff like that. So, but you would agree that like it's not really right to get mad at these people who are angry about, as you call it, the degrading of these institutional characters. Like they're well within their right to be angry.
People shouldn't be mad.
This. Yeah, okay.
I mean, I'm not saying that at all.
Look, people, yeah. So I feel like that's what's going on with Critical Drinker. So, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, I mean,
to
like,
that?
here's the thing: is like some people take it so fucking far where they're like, look, harassing the actors maniacs. And like I just don't. I would just
look.
Again, this might be more of a commentary on like communities rather than it is about individual creators, right? But
I don't approve of any of that stuff. I felt like I live in a world where I think Critical Drinker makes great content, and I'm glad he's making content, and YMS makes great content, and I'm glad you're making content. So a lot of times it felt as though, I mean, you're kind of making this argument that Critical Drinker content is somehow kind of nefarious or something, and I don't see it like that.
I wouldn't use that word. In the live stream, I made sure to say out loud, like, I don't believe that he's saying things that he doesn't believe, and I don't believe that, I believe that he has a love for art, and this is just how he views art, right? I don't see him as being necessarily the source of a problem. I see him as essentially being a byproduct of an existing cultural phenomenon that we're all seeing, right?
Well, there's like a chicken and an egg thing going on here, though, because like he would easily say, look, I wouldn't be making this kind of content if they weren't shoving overtly political messages into the movies. Like you're basically saying that there's this lens of reviewing movies that's only political. Well, that lens doesn't exist if all of a sudden we don't have this political conflict over content. Like if all the movies that came out were just acceptable to all sides of the political debate, then there would be no need to have this conversation. So, but I want to move on to something else anyway. You said in your live stream that you don't believe in free will. Like, what is your position
not
on
at all.
free will?
I mean, well, yes and no.
We sell free will on the show.
Yeah, well, we sell free will. You're undercutting our market here.
I mean, it's depending on how you define it, we, through our perspectives, the way that any individual sees the world, you are making decisions, but those decisions are ones that there is no alternative to making because you made them. So there is no alternative timeline. Unless you want to believe in alternative timelines, at which point, even if there are alternative timelines, that's not the same timeline anyway. So if we're talking about one timeline, there's only one line, there's only one version of yourself that's happened, right? So
we have a different take. We have a different take on free will. My take is that most people are driven by animal intuition, instinct, and that many people don't really turn on their reasoning, rational brain and are driven by instinct their entire lives. People who do get out of that pattern and go against their instincts, I think those people we can say have free will. So that's a little bit more nuanced position.
I don't believe in free will, but I don't believe that people should be living their lives as though they don't have free will.
Okay, that's good. Back to one.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to ask on free will?
Well, no, I mean, we used to have the long argument, Adam, about local versus universal free will.
Yeah, but we don't really have time for that.
Okay, we won't get into that.
Another time, next time.
Yeah, next
time.
The
last question I have, and then I guess we'll ask any super chats that you have, Sitch.
Yeah.
So this came up with Mahler on a stream. There's a hierarchy. I'm sure you agree as someone who likes movies. There's a hierarchy of what is most important in making a movie. I think conflict is at the top of that hierarchy. Mahler believes consistency is at the top of that hierarchy. Where do you fall on that debate?
Depends what fucking movie you're trying to make. I am so of the, if there's one thing that I want to promote in terms of the idea of what types of art should be made, is that you shouldn't have to follow a rigid guideline of what should be the most important thing in any given movie, right? Some movies can exist in a way where the plot doesn't even exist, right? There's some movies where you can make a... Have you ever seen Koyaanisqatsi? It's fucking beautiful. It's 10 out of 10. It's an experimental documentary, like music by Philip Glass from the 1980s. And, you know, you can make inferences as to what the messages of the film are about. And you can think of what footage they're showing and in the order of which they're showing it to maybe get your own interpretation out of it. But there's no narrative, right? There's no narrative, and it's not even a documentary with like voiceover. It's literally just images and music, right?
But would that be look? If you're writing a movie, if you yourself are going to write a movie, you have a hierarchy in your head of what is most important to you as a person.
Yes.
What would be at the top of your hierarchy?
A genuine reflection of myself is the most important thing to me in terms of creating any sort of art or even this conversation or my presence online, is to just portray an honest reflection of me, and for, you know, maybe someone who's not exactly like me, but maybe enough like me in certain ways, or someone else who feels like, you know, they don't align with every movie perspective that exists, or have gone through like similar things or have similar ideas, to just look at what I'm doing on the internet or in my music or in my film review videos or anything that I do. And maybe they don't get it, but maybe they can think that they get it. Or maybe I'm the closest thing that they've ever seen towards someone that they think gets it. And that's kind of what my presence is.
Have you written any stories or movies or anything?
I've written some, well, I mean, like I made some fucking like shit, like school videos on like another channel. Technically, yeah, but they're all from like when I was like 18 below.
Mm-hmm. You're not proud of them, or?
I am proud of them, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
not for the writing. Not for the writing. I'm not proud of them.
Okay.
But I think that they're very well. There's a great sense of vision in terms of how things are shot for like a 15-year-old. I think that you don't see a lot of stuff like that. But not saying you should see it and you'll enjoy it, but I'm saying that I appreciate certain things about it. Anyway, I have things that I want to do, but I'm of the mind that artistically, the way that I've made things, like the way that I might make my music and the way that I, you know, sometimes even write some of my videos, is it's important for me that the art piece takes the form of whatever it needs to be. And so it can change over time, right? So I have a bunch of ideas written on my phone of things that I would like to include in a movie. And maybe out of the 500 notes on my phone, I can look through it and be like, okay, these 14 of them work really well. And I'm going to include that in the same project. And then maybe from that, that'll inform the type of character that I want to showcase. Or maybe I'll start in one direction and be like, that was all bullshit, but I like this tiny thing about it and I want to keep it, and it'll turn into something else. So I'm actively thinking about these things, and I haven't made like a full feature or anything, but I'm really trying to. The first step towards getting the ball rolling is to completely restructure the amount of time that I'm spending working in ways that I could even begin to properly put in the time and effort that would be necessary.
Do you want to make a film someday? Is that something that you want to accomplish?
I would like to. I would like to, but I think I'm also of the mind that like I'm trying to figure out what the best approach would. So I have like trust issues when it comes to working with people, and not just in terms of
the movie industry is going to be that on steroids.
Yeah, right. So it's
obviously
like,
stranger trust issues. What genre would it be? What genre movie would you do? Oh, you don't know? You don't know?
A lot of my favorite films are not genre films.
Okay, they're like character pieces.
A lot of my favorite films are difficult to describe in terms.
Look, I said I like Rubber.
To put things into a box. Yeah, Rubber's an interesting one.
Like, what is the movie? Maybe I've seen one.
The Holy Mountain.
That's one of your favorite movies?
The Holy Mountain is currently, I think, my favorite movie.
The Holy Man or
The Holy Mountain, 1973.
The Holy Mountain.
Okay. I do not share that sentiment.
That's great.
Okay. That's fine.
That's the one with the
but I would. That's not
Heston?
The type of movie that I would.
No,
make,
you haven't seen this movie. This is the one with the jaguar tits. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, jaguar
tits. Shrine of 1,000 testicles. Right. This is.
Is there another one?
See, I liked.
Have you seen?
I thought the first half of El Topo I liked a lot, and then it just kind of went off the rails in the second half. Much better than Holy
I've only seen it once. I got to rewatch that. But that's not the type of movie I would make. When I think of something that I would make, sometimes I get bogged down by the idea of practicality, right? And so sometimes my idea for something I would think about making is kind of constrained by the practicality of what I'm making. So it's like, okay, well, do I make a character piece that would be practical to film on a small budget? Or should I be thinking in larger terms where if I had $50 million and an actual crew and a bunch of talented people that I could trust to do their job and not be shit, like what would I make then? And so that's just kind of something that I've been reflecting on and trying to actively pinpoint and figure out. Otherwise, I have just a lot of notes of, not necessarily scenes, but like moments or like character types or like scenarios or feelings. Maybe there'll be a song that I'm like, damn, I really want to use this song in a movie in this way. Quentin Tarantino does that a lot, right? His songs are like very much playlist movies.
Oh yeah.
And so who knows, maybe at some point all of these ideas will come together in a certain way, or maybe I'll make a piece of shit and it won't, who cares?
Look, it's first films are difficult as it is, so
yep.
Do it and move on. You want to read some super chats?
Yeah, let me read some super chats.
Do you have a heart out here in like 5 minutes, or can you stick around a little longer?
I can stick around a bit.
Okay.
How long are you thinking?
I don't know. 10 minutes, maybe.
15 minutes? 30 minutes? I don't know.
An hour.
Sure, can I pee first?
2 hours.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go.
Take a break. Yeah.
Sure. Take a rest.
Cool. Is there any non?
So there's a
Behold.
bunch. Micro Omega for 18 months says, behold my awesome milestone. Behold! Thank you.
That is great.
For 18 months has been beholding.
That is a great milestone.
Rosie McRosen for $10 says, quote, woke art equals religious art. Yes, there are examples of it done well, but most of what you get are things like pure flicks. It's usually is bad when the message is prioritized over quality. I agree completely.
That happens quite a bit. Yeah. That's usually the sticking point. A lot of times in these Christian movies. I mean, I ask myself, do they have to be this bad? Like,
Right. Quickly,
Yeah.
Chibi for 4 months says, "Hi, Adam. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on the very good show you definitely intend to watch. Mob Psycho 100, Mongos Bang Your Bongos."
well, I've watched some of it and I do like it. Yeah.
You haven't watched any more of it?
No. The animation is great. It's basically
Shame.
it's about a psychic
Yeah.
with a boss that really isn't a psychic, but is
Yes.
pretending to be a psychic.
Yes. It's
And a
hilarious.
kid who is a very good psychic.
But it's like socially inept at everything else.
It's got great characters. I do like the characters. Yeah. I watched one episode and I started watching the second episode, so I didn't make it very far. Yeah.
Hello.
Hey.
What's up?
Do you watch anime though?
Not really.
Oh, shame.
You
I
should
like
watch
Death
Kill
Note
the
a
Kill.
lot.
You
You
should
like
watch
Death Note, you
Kill the
said?
Kill. I think
I
you'll
do.
like that.
Kill the kill or kill it?
Kill la Kill.
La Kill. Yeah.
Kill la kill.
I think the first third of Death Note is fantastic. I'll say that.
Pre-episode 27.
I don't know. Well, before the memory wipe comes, I think it's great. When the memory wipe comes, I think it's kind of it's good, but not as good. And then obviously once the event happens, I think it goes downhill. But though the end is great. Okay. CT for 2 Canadians says, "I'm gonna just say I fucking love YMS. Been a fan forever."
Thank you.
Yes.
Rosie McRose for $5 says, "I'd be curious if YMS would be critical of the Bread to movie critics like Maggie May Fish."
Oh, that's a good question.
Don't know enough about them.
Okay, you should check them out. Probably make you crazy. Alex Stewart for $28 says, "I like YMS's videos a lot, but let me re-ask a question that was asked on EFAP. Why should normal people have to go watch film festivals and trudge through massive sludge of indie films and TV to find good media?"
That's so funny that was their takeaway, because all I I was in my original criticism, I was saying that, mostly towards the critical drinker who has like an actual audience, first of all. Second, I don't, as you have witnessed throughout this entire conversation, I don't really make hard prescriptions of like, you have to do this, or I just try to have a nuanced, like, hey, maybe think about doing this sort of thing. And even beyond that, like, Joker's a fucking film festival movie. It's not like it's not even just film festivals. It's like, hey, there's an entire wealth of media being created. The bar is lower than ever before for people to be creating things. Most people's problems is that they don't have the actual proper tools or know-how to be able to pick things that, like, if they looked at like a film festival lineup, the average person, regardless of political affiliation, is not going to be able to look at that whole thing and being like, what movie do I even want to watch, right? And if you decide random ones, like, it doesn't even matter what film festival you're going to, like, probably going to be a bunch of bullshit, right? What I do is, when I'm gearing up for a film festival or something like that, and because it's my job, I look at every single film in the catalog. I look at their IMDb's of like, who wrote it, who directed it, did they do something else that I liked? Those are the surest fire ways to know whether or not you might enjoy something, is just who's involved in it. And if, especially director and writer, I would not say so as much for the actor, unless it's somebody who, like, you have to see. Did it have any buzz at like a previous film festival? All of these things that, I can already tell. I'm not even looking at chat or future comments or anything, but people are obviously going to say, like, that is so much of a barrier to entry. Like, that is unreasonable to ask a normal human being to do. And that's why I'm not saying that a normal human being should do that. I'm saying I make fucking videos about film festival movies. I make fucking videos about indie movies. If you want to find some good things that you might enjoy that are a bit like out of your element, or maybe some things that you haven't heard before, maybe look at one of my end of the year list videos. I show clips from the movies. A lot of the films that I recommend, I make sure to not spoil the experience in my review, but just give you enough of a taste so that you know whether or not it's something you'd be interested in. Mahler, he found the movie The Hunt from 2012. with through one of my year list videos. He loved it. He recommended it on his own thing, right? So, all I'm saying is like things exist other than fucking Disney movies, and I think a lot of people would be a lot happier, and I think the industry would move in a more positive direction if people made the slightest of efforts by just clicking on a video and maybe seeing if there's some recommendations. Yeah, that's it.
Silence You Idiot for $20. Thank you. Says, should I be so lucky for Sitch to read this to YMS? Give him some trolley scenarios. The poor guy missed the EFAP segment and did some on his own, but wussed out on being culpable to any intentional murders. Oh my God. You wouldn't kill people with the trolleys? Come on.
No.
Shame.
Good for you.
Wait, so for everyone, did you just not touch the lever?
Unless because one of them was like my friend, and then I was like, yes, I will murder people for my friend.
Wow. Okay. Terrible.
That was my exception to the rule.
Thos Apprentice says, how does YMS feel about Lion King 1.5? I've been watching you since junior high religiously. Glad to see you here and on EFAB watching Saw.
I remember it was bad, but I haven't seen it in a long time. Maybe I'll see it at some point as an adult, but I remember it was bad.
Fondue says, has YMS ever heard of waifu culture?
It's kind of self-descriptive, isn't it? What do you mean?
I don't know. That's all.
Is there more to it than what I could imagine it's about?
I think there's nothing more to it. I think that's
okay. Well, now I've heard of it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this is great. You have to come on again so we could talk about Free Will and Holy Mountain. Maybe you can
I would love
change my mind on Holy Mountain.
See, I don't feel the need to. I don't feel.
Well, I just want to understand why you like it because I don't understand.
Okay, cool.
Did you
do a video on it?
I talked about it on my podcast. We did it was recommended on the podcast, Sardonicast. So there's like a huge 30-minute chunk where we're talking about it. You should just be able to search Sardonicast, the Holy Mountain. You'll hear me talk about it with a couple other people.
You don't want to read these Bricknose super chats?
Did I miss them?
Well, they don't seem too.
They weren't questions, but I can read
they're
them.
They're basically about the topic. And they're
Bricknose, thank you, Bricknose. Says the challenge is the status quo isn't seen as political while any deviation stands out. Even if the film isn't necessarily about the thing, it does become exhausting when messages like racism show up in every film.
So, go ahead.
And they also said, it's tiring when every film has woke messaging. What sucks is they often tell instead of showing, or they show the same thing over and over, like showing white people microaggressing or having heavy racial and sexism themes. But to play devil's advocate, the anti-woke can be as cringe as the woke, especially when every female character gets auto-bashed. Gay, female, and non-white characters isn't a problem. Bad writing and condescending messages is.
Yeah, those are great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you agree with everything he just said?
I don't know everything, but probably most of it.
I basically.
You said and it's funny because I know you followed me on Twitter a long time ago, and you said before the stream that you watched some of my old YouTube content back when I used to make actual content. You watched some of my old content. What do you remember? What was the thing that you're like, I like this guy?
I don't remember a specific video or topic, but I remember the animation style and I remember enjoying the humor.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, yeah.
That's hilarious.
Awesome. Anything else, Adam?
I mean,
Adam?
we can say goodbye. I mean, if you want to talk more.
Was that all the super chats?
Well, there's a bunch that aren't addressed specifically to you. But if you want to hang around for longer and talk to us.
Yeah, why not? Look, if he wants to hang out, hang out. Sure. Look, we're arguing with some people next about
some idiots. I'm sorry, wait, what? Nice people.
Look at that. You shouldn't do that.
Poisoning the well.
Exactly. We're arguing over the Speaker McCarthy being ousted thing. Do you follow politics? I mean,
I am addicted to American politics.
Okay. So you are interested in politics. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, Sitch, you want to lay out your Speaker McCarthy argument?
Should we talk about that? Should we talk about Israel?
No, let's not talk about.
Is that too?
Let's not talk about
spicy.
Israel.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just look. We want to have fun here. It's just.
I know. I want to get YMS to say something that will get clipped and get him in trouble. That will get a lot of views. That's what I want.
No, that's
I
not
mean,
really our
that's
style.
how to make a good show.
Yeah.
So,
What's your
Adam,
most
do you,
controversial political opinion?
Hmm. We should cancel women.
That's not
nice.
controversial. That's just based. What do you mean?
Wow.
Come on.
Were you following the Speaker McCarthy being ousted situation?
What I know about it is that, correct me if I'm wrong, there was some sort of government shutdown thing, and that was related to Matt Gaetz sort of spearheading McCarthy being ousted, and there's no replacement right now. And then some people are saying like they want Trump as speaker, but that doesn't seem like a very likely thing to actually happen. And that's all I know about it. Was I incorrect about any of that?
No, you got everything you said. You got correct.
Okay.
There was a budget shutdown that they were threatening. It ended up getting worked out in the end. These 8 Republicans were very upset that there weren't deep spending cuts made.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some compromise with the Democrats. And so these 8 Republicans targeted McCarthy for ousting from his speakership. So, but the argument that Sitch has made is that if Democrats could get 8 people together to save McCarthy, then they would be able to wrestle control away from these, what people are calling far-right Republicans.
To be more specific, my argument was, now this is a fact claim, so it could be, depends on what the facts are, was that it seemed to me that the Democrats didn't attempt to do a serious deal where they'd say, listen, McCarthy, we'll save you from the guillotine if you do a bunch of things that we want. And my position was they should have at least attempted to do that. Maybe he doesn't want to do it. Maybe he tells him to F off. But that should have at least been attempted, because then they could wrestle control away from Matt Gaetz and, those 8 crazy people in the House.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to add to that. It seems like just kind of like clusterfuck as usual.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
There you
go. Well, a lot of people got very upset because they were upset that Sitch would insinuate that the Democrats work with those evil Republicans. So that was basically their critique. Yeah.
Okay.
So
we're
going to argue with 2 people about that.
Wasn't there a point in time where like it was considered to be a thing you wanted to do for people to like work across the aisle to reach out to the other? It used to be like a coalition. Canadian politics is very different. I mean, there's a little bit of American politics bleeding into Canadian politics at this point, but it's very different.
Is it weird to be, first of all, is it weird to be not American? But is it weird to be not American and like have so much of like the news be focused on politics in a completely different country?
The population of Canada is less than that of California.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not as many things happening. And even with the things that are happening, it's not as crazy. Mm-hmm. Debatably. But America has so much global political influence that even if it wasn't our only border, it would still be worthy of news on like a global political scale. So yeah, sometimes there's people in Canada that forget what country they're from. They'll be like, this is my First Amendment right. It's like, we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We don't have a First Amendment. Like, what do you even fucking, like, some people are just so dumb. Like that they forget that they're in Canada. And like on the other end of the spectrum, there was like at one point there was like the Black Lives Matter Toronto thing. Like they like co-opted the Pride Parade and like all this shit. And I was like, this seems like just such a weird, like, not to say like you might not have any problems that are legitimate, but like it seems like such a America brained thing right now in the country. Yeah, so it's interesting, and it's something that I not only view as an outsider, but I also view with the perspective of, I spend like half the year in the States just traveling and
So you think it's about high time America just took over Canada, right?
What are you, some kind of globalist? You want a one world?
No, I'm just America first. Okay. America's taking over the world, baby.
That would be a globalist outcome.
Well, okay, at least Canada. Listen, you guys are a hat, okay? You're up there thinking about American politics more anyway.
How is Canadian universal healthcare? I hear conflicting reports. Some people tell me it's amazing, and usually they're progressives, and I hear some people say, "Oh, it's the worst thing ever," and usually they're conservatives. It's funny how it always lines up that way.
I know, right? It's almost like there's certain conversations that are a bit more nuanced and have a bit more going into it, where anybody, depending on their political persuasion, can just get something entirely different out of the conversation, depending on how they want to frame it. But my perspective is, I'm glad that I have a free, but technically not free, because once you're past a certain income bracket, you do pay into it through your taxes in a certain way. And it's all done provincially, so it's different by province, like our version of states. I'm glad that I have something that exists where if I have any kind of like medical emergency, or like need to call an ambulance, or like I dislocated my knee, like a visit to the doctor, a lot of these basic things, I'm very happy that I don't have to pay for that as much as I might have to if I was in the States. But at the same time, we're facing a very unfortunate point in time where the institution of our medical system in Canada is slowly, I guess progressively faster, just kind of becoming dismantled, where doctors aren't being paid enough. There isn't enough of the budget being allocated to things like that. And so now you have all throughout the country, this is not even just in one province, you have a bunch of doctors that are just like retiring and then not being replaced by other doctors. And so then the existing doctors are now in charge of more patients, which causes, longer wait times. None of them are, you're not able to find a family doctor anywhere.
Wow.
Like pretty much every major province in Canada, if you want to find a family doctor, you have to be put on a wait list, and most places just don't even have a wait list because there's so many people trying to get one that they just gave up, which I think is bullshit. It's one of those kind of unfortunate realities of just an institution exists and it served its purpose and it was very nice, and I like that it exists, but you have to maintain it, otherwise it's going to crumble. And people are asleep at the wheel for too long, then it crumbles. And now we have kind of like, some pros and cons. Like if I need to call an ambulance, I'm going to the hospital, I'm not getting charged. That's nice. But, for routine things of just like, I want to get this checked out or something, like sometimes you're kind of left in a situation where the medical advice you might get from a doctor, you can kind of tell that they're like, I don't know if I believe it's serious enough. And they're kind of like leaning on that side of like, and it's like, am I getting the quality of care that I want out of this? And maybe it's coming from
give you like 35 tests for everything. They're like, oh, look, you've got a little mark here. We better test that out.
Well, yeah, because it's all, that's the other side of like the financial incentivization for
it
is like, fuck it, why not? There's money involved in it. One of the problems with the American system is that there's this weird kind of middlemen area where you're being overcharged for the same services and the same drugs and the same, like the lack of regulation in terms of like the pricing models and like having it go through the insurance company and the doctor, and kind of just prices being made up, even though some of it's just like, oh, it's covered by insurance, but you look at the bill, it's like, why am I being charged like $100 just for like a Kleenex or something, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
That seems like more of an issue in the States. So, if not everything is covered by Canadian healthcare also is part of the problem. I wish we had dental. I think we're now starting to get dental for lower income people.
Do you have dentists there? Because I had a friend of mine who was...
We have dentists, yeah.
No dentists.
They make more money than the doctors because it's like almost none of it is like by insurance.
This
It's
is
not
why
government run.
the English have the meme of having bad teeth, is because dental wasn't covered by the health service, and there wasn't a lot of dentists in England. So dentists were like so expensive, nobody could ever go.
Yeah. So I'm like, I can see arguments. I can see myself being in favor of the idea of basic necessities, medical wise, being covered in a universal government functioning way. But I am not opposed to the existence of other for-profit institutions if, let's say, someone, wanted to get better care or was able to afford getting better care. I believe that's how they have it in Australia. There's some government run and some private hospitals. But yeah, I don't, there's no perfect solution for everything. And statistically, if you want to simplify it, it's better to be in Canada healthcare wise if you're poor, and better to be in America healthcare wise if you're rich.
Right.
Is essentially how it breaks down.
I think that's why we have the healthcare system we have here. Would you broadly call yourself a progressive or a conservative?
Are those the only two options I get?
Well, I guess libertarian. Yeah, I mean,
Whatever
sure, pick
option
one.
you want.
Liberal,
Enlightened centrist. What do you want to call yourself?
If I were to describe my political ideology, I would use one word: based.
Based.
I knew you were going to say that.
That means you're a conservative.
That means you're very
conservative
right-wing,
is
yeah.
the based word. Yeah.
Uh-oh. I find myself
How would you
left-leaning.
describe us? We've had a conversation here for a couple hours. What would you like if your wife asked you later? Well, were those guys liberal or conservative? What would you say?
I mean, I would say like from our conversation, I would say like center-ish.
Oh,
but
good.
This is also under the. I would also like to add to that. What a lot of people don't realize is that when you have, I guess, if we're going to call it like the political spectrum or like even the Overton window, it's very different per country, right? So,
Right.
I think from an American frame of reference, center would make sense based on the conversation that we had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're saying for Americans we're
cool.
center, but for Canada we're like right wing.
Right. The word wing sometimes is loaded. So sometimes I like to say right leaning.
Right leaning. Okay.
Center
like
You're
right.
saying a bunch of commies up there in Canada land. Probably why we got to take it over.
Uh-oh.
Introduce freedom. Do you have anything? You said you have like obviously you don't have a First Amendment. Do you have a freedom of speech in that fake Bill of Rights you were talking about?
Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I mean, I don't know if you could argue that there's no absolutist free speech in America, by the way. I just want to point that out.
Well, there's no, obviously. Yeah.
There is not, obviously. Yeah. Defamation.
That
and-
wouldn't make sense if there was. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, I believe that there's something of like similar wording, but not as, not as strict. We don't have the right to weapons, I don't think.
Bad. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what's in it.
I sent
You
the
don't
link
even
out to
know?
those other guys, by the way.
I don't even
Just to let
know
you guys
because, well, like I said earlier, like I'm not that huge on like institutions in general. Not saying like burn everything into the ground. I'm not an anarchist.
Oh, I was
But-
going to say
Wait, how do you-
anarcho-capitalist.
Wait.
No, I'm like in the way
know
that
what
I
the
live my life, I consider
Mhm.
myself to be an individual. And
Right.
a liberal.
if you want to say that, sure.
Wait,
Yeah,
do
I
you
like
know
it.
what the First Amendment in America is? The Bill of
The
Rights?
First Amendment is freedom of speech, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah, there's
look
other
at that.
parts of it, but okay. Do you know what the Second Amendment is?
Is the Second Amendment right to bear arms?
Yes.
It is.
Very
Look
good.
at this.
Very good. I assume you don't know the Third Amendment.
I'm not sure I know the Third Amendment. What is it?
Well,
Right to liberty.
What's the Third Amendment?
Uh-huh. No, I like this. I like this.
I don't know.
Oh, okay. So wait, do you know the first? What is the first part of?
Oh, yeah, I know the Third Amendment. Everyone
It's-
knows that.
Everyone knows it. What is it, Adam? You looked it up. Now you looked it up.
I didn't look
Thou-
it up.
thou
I
no,
looked
shalt
it
no,
up.
my
not-
Adam. My Adam.
Thou
sorry.
shalt
Yeah, you're
not
right.
allow soldiers to be quartered in my home.
That's right. That's
Is that
right.
a real?
Yes,
That's the
that's
phrasing.
the Third Amendment. Yep.
What does that mean?
No couch surfers.
So it was saying that you didn't have to. Soldiers were not allowed to like go up to you and say, we're in peacetime. I get to live in your house.
We're commandeering.
Apparently
your
that
home.
was a thing back in those days.
That's
okay.
funny.
So, but do you know what the first? I don't know what it is. What's the first right guaranteed in Canada?
I would have to look it up. I have no fucking idea.
I just thought it was funny that you know the first two in America.
Because it's fucking 24/7. Like people treat the Constitution like a different version of the Bible, right? Like people treat this.
Yes.
It's a sacred text for a lot of people, whereas the Charter of Rights and Freedoms are like, if you're getting arrested or in legal trouble, you might want to look it up.
Wow,
right? Like nobody like talks about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada in the same way that people talk about the Constitution.
That's a problem. They should listen.
Why?
Because that's what protects us from the government. Okay.
What's
I mean, but it's all like, aren't there like these government institutions and documents are like constantly being like amended and updated and shit anyway. It's like, do we really have any guarantees? I think what's protecting you more than the Constitution is just like the people in the country that would freak out if you tried to remove something like, right to bear arms, right?
Well,
like,
I would say, yeah.
Less about the document itself and more about like the political culture of people.
It's very difficult to amend the Constitution. It requires like 3/4 of Congress, and I think like 3/4 of the states have to sign off on it and ratify it. So it's like very difficult to change that. But I mean, obviously, there's always a threat of a military takeover. Like, who cares what the law says? But I think the culture in America, since it has such reverence for the Constitution, that's what creates like the protective element in our society.
You could argue that,
yeah.
Yeah.
But so I looked it up I looked up the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The second fundamental freedom.
You must be gay.
Yeah. It says you must be gay and trans your kids. And then the third one, it says everyone has the following fundamental freedoms: freedom of conscience, and religion.
What does that even mean?
I don't know. Freedom of conscience and religion.
No thought crimes. Yes.
And it does say freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media communication. So I don't know if that means freedom of speech, but it sounds close enough.
Freedom of expression. Okay.
There you go.
All right. I can say whatever I want.
There you go. You can put all the blackface.
I'm doing art. I'm playing a
okay.
character.
Is it weird?
Yeah, who knows? It's all like so interpretable, and like there's always going to be ways for it to be malleable, right? So who knows?
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else, my Adam?
Well, yeah, we can let you go. I sent the link to those other guys. So, but this has been a great conversation, Adam. So
I really enjoyed this.
I hope you had fun. Like, if you want to come back and hang out, if you want to come back and hang out, let us know. Like, if you want us to come on your show, we owe you. So,
I don't know if I have like much of a show in terms of a.
Do you have? I don't like EFAP always invites a bunch of guests on. I don't know if you do the same. So, I know that
no, I don't have. I usually don't do like Discord hangouts. The closest thing to that would be like I have like a Sunday game stream, and sometimes someone will join long distance or something. But beyond that, I don't.
I'm very good at Magic the Gathering. That's my.
He is not.
Yeah, invite me on again, and as long as we plan very far in the future, we can make it happen because I like to write things in my calendar.
Maybe there'll be that's awesome because a lot of people don't, and I keep a calendar too. Obviously, we schedule in advance, but maybe there'll be some crazy incendiary movie that'll come out and we can argue about it. We had a really good debate when Barbie came out with Doomer Media. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was on.
Heard of them.
Yeah, he was on EFAP a few times, but yeah, no, obviously arguing about politics and media is fun. So yeah, come back.
That was a very substantive and friendly and productive conversation. Thank you.
Cool. Hey, fans, do not assault this guy's comment section. Please leave Adam alone.
And Brittany.
All right. Take care, man.
Thanks, you too. Have a good one.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.